Take a person, take a story, take you on a journey. It's your take.
On today's Your Take, we listen to the life story and journey of a professional psychic. My guest was born and raised in Scotland. As a small child, my guest had the ability to see and communicate with spirits. My guest began a spiritual journey, traveling and working in churches in the UK, the Shetlands, the United States, and Canada. Her tutorage as a psychic medium occurred when a lady called Jenny Brown took her under her wing. She also received testimony from the renowned psychic medium, Glyn Edwards, who advised her to use her gift to help others. Since that endorsement, she has gone on to become a renowned psychic. She's made several television appearances and won STB TV's World's Greatest Psychic Competition. She's worked with police to catch a serial killer, runs live psychic events, and has worked with several celebrities, including actors, actresses, musicians, and politicians. On today's Your Take, I'm joined by June Field. We discuss June's Scottish heritage, her early encounters with spirits, the travels and tutorage, the skills and techniques she uses, and the dangers involved, the many areas she has worked in, such as live events, home psychic readings, and television. June, a very warm welcome. Thank you kindly for joining me today on Your Take.
Pleasure. My pleasure, James. Nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Very much looking forward to hearing your journey and your story from its very roots. And for me, hearing about your career as a professional psychic and how you managed to get into this area and the skills and knowledge you have. June, can we begin by going back to the very beginnings?
Right, about my childhood. I was born like this. This is not something I wanted to be in life. I was always born a bit weird. I liken it to, think of us all like televisions. We've all got the same number of channels, but not everyone's channels are all tuned in, and mine were. So I don't have anything to compare to. This is the way I was born. This is the way I transmit. And my mum and dad, my dad was an engineer, my mum was a nurse. And I have a sister, Linda, who lives in Vancouver, Canada, and runs her own business. And it missed a generation because it was in the family. And it missed a generation, then it hit me, the only one in our family. And because my mum knew about it, I wasn't singled out as being weird. She knew what was going on with me as a child. So it was kind of nurtured and it was accepted, but just a normal childhood.
I want to tap into in just a moment and talk about your great aunt, and you mentioned about it being in the family, but before we do so, I wanted to go on to your schooling and find out where you were schooled and what are your memories from your time there and what subjects were you particularly interested in, and did you go on to further education, and did you have any early career ambitions?
Well, I've always been interested in music, and I started off in a primary school called Rosebank Primary in Dundee. It's just actually knocked down now, and there's another one standing in its place. But I have good memories of my childhood there and had lots of friends. It was just a normal childhood. I didn't realise I was any different. I was always interested in music. I always learned to play the piano from the age of 4. I've sang also. I was very interested in music, played in a brass band. They always used to use me as a troubleshooter, and if someone was missing from the band, they'd take me off somewhere and say, well, you can do percussion. don't play percussion. Well, you are tonight. So musical background, my ambition was to be a music teacher, and I progressed to further education to learn how to teach music. And I did for a little while teach music, which I loved, and I did play in the brass band, and I do like to sing. That's still one of my pastimes, although I don't have much time to play the piano. And when I do, I think I play a little bit like Les Dawson now. So people are going to be rolling around when I rake out a Rachmaninoff or something. It's like that. Oh dear God, that's awful. So, but I still enjoy it. So I put my headphones on and just plug in so that nobody could really hear me.
Well, Les Dawson was great for starters and brings back some fond childhood memories of watching his TV show and tinkling on the piano, some of those wonderful gags. And very, very well written as well. I wanted to keep on the theme of family because you came from a close family and you mentioned this love of music. I wanted to pick up on that. What kind of music was being played in the family home, and what did that kind of open you up to in terms of the music you were buying from a sort of young age?
I was just normal. I was just a normal child. The type of music that was played would be, you know, Frank Sinatra or Doris Day, things like that. Nothing spectacularly classical. And it was just later on in life, I was much of a David Cassidy fan. I liked him. But later on in life, when I did go to piano lessons, learn to play, I really liked Beethoven, Tchaikovsky, Rachmaninoff, and I acquired that myself, although that was a bit alien to my parents. They didn't listen to anything like that, but it was just something that I was just drawn to.
I want to go back to family history, and I wanted to ask you to share your knowledge of your great aunt, who was a transfiguration medium. I understand that as a child as well, that you could see spirits. Can you discuss those early encounters? Mm-hmm. What were those experiences like, and how do you think they shaped your childhood?
Well, when you go back to my childhood, remember, I didn't have anything to compare to. I thought that everyone was exactly the same. I just accepted it as if everyone saw. So you would accept it, especially at night, because my sister and I, we had bunk beds. And because I was the youngest, she was 4 years older than me. I was on the top and she was on the bottom. And so when I was young and they put the lights out and we said good night, I would say to my dad, you know, there's people in here. And he said, just smile at them and they'll smile back. Because the minute it got dark and the minute that, you know, I was in a relaxed state, I would start to see people draw around me. And it frightened me in a sense because I didn't know who they were. It didn't frighten me that they were there because they'd always been there. And when I think back now, they were looking down at me from quite high. So they must have been about 8 feet tall, because I was in the top of a bunk bed, remember, but you don't think about that as a child. You just think, you know, who are these people? And they would just watch me. They didn't smile, they weren't frowning, they would just watch. And I tried if you smile at them, they'll smile back, but they didn't. They just still stood and watched me, and I didn't know who they were. And that happened most nights and right through my childhood.
And there was no way of conversing. It was just literally a figure and facial expressions. There was no dialogue at all. None,
no dialogue. They would just stand and they would just watch me. And it was just as if they were just looking at something. And I didn't interact with them. I would just eventually just go to sleep, close my eyes, go to sleep. I just got used to them being there. And my mum, I would say, you know, there's people in my room. You know, they got a bit closer. It frightened me, but my mum knew because it was her aunt that had the gift. And as I say, it skipped a generation. And so when it hit me, she knew what was happening. They say that most mediums, they ones that are natural are left-handed and musical. So they say both left-hander and musical. Well, it was musical. Now it's a bit like Les Dawson now, but left-hander and musical. And I was both. And she understood it and she just accepted it. It didn't frighten her. So because she didn't get frightened, then it didn't frighten me.
Let's come on to your great aunt again. Did you know her? And if you didn't, what was your knowledge through family history or conversations you'd had with your mother or any other family relatives? What was your kind of knowledge of her? Did you have any whatsoever?
I didn't meet her, but she was spoken of often with my gran and with my mum, and she was seemingly a bit of a character. And she moved down to Birmingham and she passed away down there. And, she was like the different one of the family. I'm the different one of mine. It doesn't make me bad. It just makes me different. But she was seemingly a character, and they would talk of times that, they would maybe all sit around the dining room table and they'd say, her name was Nellie, well, it was Helen, but she got called Nellie. They'd say, Nellie, let's have a seance. Let's have a seance. So everyone would kind of get together and she would go into trance and she'd just move back and forward and she'd bring through people from spirit side. But what she was able to do was that if you gave her a photograph in an envelope of someone who had passed in a sealed envelope, she'd be able to take it between her hands and take on their features.
We've spoken about family life, your upbringing, experiences as a young child, and we've touched upon your great aunt Nellie. Can we move on and talk about the beginning of your spiritual journey and the time you served working in many churches here in the UK, the Shetlands, and then in the USA and Canada? What did you learn and get out of that particular experience?
Well, this is not something I wanted to do in life. I had never thought of it. My main aim was to shut down and to get peace and quiet at night and not to see people. And as a teenager, I always fought, with going through a little rigmarole of, don't come to me at night. I just want to get some sleep, etc., etc. I was interested in music, but it never ever went away, and I would always encounter these people mostly at night because I was in my most relaxed state. And then, of course, as I got older, I went to a spiritual church, mostly to learn to shut down. And I did go to this spiritual church, and I encountered a lovely lady called Jenny Brown, who noticed me straight away and went, oh my gosh, you see spirit. And she took me under her wing. She actually gave me a little reading. And while she was giving me a reading, I was describing who was next to her and who they were. And she just looked at me and she said, we need to get her into this church. She's the one to watch. And it was after I managed to gain control and be able to switch off and on and be able to get some sleep and to shut down and to be taught how to shut down and how to open up and how to tune in. That's when I gained control. I became more confident with it and wasn't afraid of it and allowed it forward. And I shot forward under her wing. I would go 1 week to the spiritual church development circle and the next week to her house. And then the next, it would alternate weeks. And then I ended up shooting up and taking the development circle in the church eventually, and the advanced development circle. And then I branched out, and all the churches always seemed to be filled when I was working in them. And then I branched out from there, and then it got to be word of mouth, and I traveled about and built up that way.
I get the impression that Jenny is a key figure in your life and somebody you're particularly fond of and have a great deal of respect for as well. Can you describe Jenny's personality and what she taught you and what techniques and methods were used?
Jenny was a great lady. I would call her like my spiritual mum, but she was a force to be reckoned with. You know, if, for instance, you were working on a platform and you went to get upset about something, she would be in the front, she'd go, just cut that now. You have to be like the surgeon. You've got to step back and describe things. You don't get emotionally involved with this. How could you be of help? It's like a surgeon saying to you, oh my God, you've got cancer or you're not going to live long. That doesn't work. You step back. So she taught me a lot, and all about discipline and how to open and how to close, and etiquette, the etiquette that's required working in a church or on a platform, and what you can say and what you can't say and how to link. She passed away, but an interesting little story about that was that she always said to me that, and to people, this is the one to watch. And she said she would go into trance herself, and there would people speak to me and they would say, you will be good, but this lady will not see it from this side of life. And I remember being in Tenerife and opening up in transfiguration for the very first time, in a closed cabinet. And when I finished the session, so to speak, and got upstairs and checked my mobile phone, there was an actual message on it from her daughter saying that she had passed away that evening. And so she didn't see it from that side of life. I actually conducted her funeral, and she was just a very special lady to me. But the coincidences that we had was that her name was Jenny Brown. My maiden name was Brown. She played the piano and taught the piano. I played the piano and taught the piano. Her husband worked at the Timex and also Bona Long and dealt with clocks. My dad also did the same. Her husband painted, my dad painted, and we made it that they worked probably at the same place at the same time and would have known each other.
Oh, wow, incredible.
Isn't that strange? Very strange.
Many coincidences, and it seems that she was a special lady and a mentor in your life.
Without a doubt.
But we moved from one mentor to another, and I wanted to ask you if you could share your experiences under the tutorage of renowned psychic medium Glyn Edwards. And can you describe your time at Arthur Findlay College, what you learned during your time there, and how did Glyn's words of wisdom impact and influence you?
Well, I went to Arthur Findlay College on a couple of courses, and I wanted to learn, so I went by myself. I didn't take a friend and go. I just went myself. And there was a lovely lady called Eileen Davies, who is from Aberdeen, a medium, and I was in her class, but it was under Glyn Edwards and other people were there. And so what they did was they picked the best out of the classes and then they threw them along to Glyn Edwards. And I said, he was a very tall man that was a bit overpowering, and he would push himself right into your face and talk to you. And I'm very small, I'm only 5'2", and he scared me. And I thought, oh, please don't put me along in his class. And she went, you have to go along and be in his class. So there was one of the times that I reluctantly went, and he paired me up with a guy, and he stood us both, and he didn't even look at us. He looked away and he said, okay, to me, get a link and give it to him. And I did. I linked with him, I gave him some information, and he turned round to the guy and he went, is there something that you could get that would just clinch it for you? And he went to Glyn Edwards, yes. And he looked at me and he went, well, get it and give it to him. And I thought, oh my God, I don't work like that. Well, I did. And so I was asked to work by Glyn Edwards in the sanctuary to the public in front of all the mediums. Now, they chose 5 of us, of the best mediums on these courses. And he said, took us in a room and he said, let me tell you something. You've got 5 minutes each and you get it right. Because if you faff around, I'll just stop you. And I thought, oh my God. So I'm on the end, and every single one before that was stopped. And I thought, because he just went, no, stop that, John with a heart attack or whatever. When I stood up, I actually said, I'm going straight to the back. I've got a young guy that passed away outside a nightclub. He was in his 20s. He was at a birthday party. You know, he was in London. He was stabbed. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time. He died where he lay. And, but he didn't come from London. And the woman who I'd linked with right at the back, now bearing in mind I was in Stansted, it was her son, and he lived in Dundee. That's where he came from. And he let me finish. And after that, he always looked for me. He goes, where's that girl that? And I thought, oh, please don't, because I was always afraid of him. And I would hear him in the corridor. And you can go either along the corridor or up the top to get to the same area. And if I heard him, I would go shooting along the top corridor. But he cornered me once. And he said to me, you're going to be working all over the world. And he was looking down on me. And I thought, oh, I'm so scared shitless of you. And that's what he said, you will be working all over the world. And I thought, yeah, okay. And he was right. He saw something I didn't. It was just that he was just overpowering, that I just didn't like the confrontation from him. So he scared me. But good medium.
Was he quite an intimidating figure then?
Oh gosh, yes, without a doubt. You know, you would just say it as it was. He'd cut you dead. You know, and I thought, oh no, that's not the way that I am. I'd say to Eileen, please don't send me along there. You have to go. And I thought, oh my God, I hate this. But you know, that I worked with him, and he didn't get me into bother or into trouble. He said, you know, that I was doing well. And to get that from him, I took that as a great compliment, because he was up there.
He obviously saw you had a special gift, and you mentioned about his wise words to go out to the world and help people and use your abilities and your skills. And I wanted to come to that next. From your education and tutorage, how did you go about forging a career as an international psychic medium? Can you discuss the areas you work in and the people you work with? And can you tell us about the live psychic events and shows and the workshops you facilitate?
Well, I was actually teaching music and karate, because I fought all over the world doing karate as well. So I was doing both of those, and I was also then going around spiritual churches. You could call it serving my time, you know, my apprenticeship. And I would travel around and I would do things for expenses. And Jenny Brown, she would have me at her house, and she would have some people around, and I would do private readings, and she would time it. And, you know, I was just serving my time. And then one time I was asked to work in a theatre with a few other people, and it worked well. And then I did another theatre, and then it worked out into theatres. And then I was asked to go to Belfast and Shetlands, and then I was asked to go over to the USA and work in a church from someone who had a connection there, and Canada, etc. I now do events all over the world, and I do spiritual intensive weekend workshops, which I love, because that's the teaching part of me. And I like to allow people to get the key to their door. Now, to me, everyone is different, every single person. So what would work for me might not work for you. So when you get people that will go, oh my goodness, listen to this meditation CD, this is great, this is good for you. It might just make you want to poke your eyes out, because you might not like it. And I'm a great believer that you need to find your own key to open your own door to spirit side, because someone else's key won't work for you. So I try in my intensive spiritual weekend workshops to do that. And most people, if not everyone, will go, oh my God, did I get that? Yep. Just remember what you did, because that's your key. And it allows them to then work their way forward with the key that they've got to open their door to be in touch with those in spirit that are connected with them.
I want to talk about education and educating others about this particular area. And I wanted to ask you, June, what techniques and methods you use to contact spirits, is this something that can be taught to anyone? And is there some sense of psychology involved as well? And lastly, I wanted to ask, what are the dangers involved in doing this?
Well, yes, anyone could be in touch with spirit, just the same as anyone can learn to play the piano. Now, they're not all going to be concert pianists, but you can learn to knock out your favourite tune, right? And so it's just a matter of quietening the mind, because the conscious mind, the chattering monkey, it doesn't shut up for an instant. So, but if you create the right conditions, or you tune into the right channel, you'll be able to receive, because those on spirit side are transmitting all the time. It just happens that if you get yourself on the right wavelength, you can receive. The biggest mistake I think people make is they wait till they're having a meltdown or they're upset about a loved one and they're shutting themselves down. But if you remain quiet and a calm mind and you find your key, and when I say key, I mean something that would resonate with you to quieten your mind. Some people like to listen to waves on the shore, other people rain battering down on a tin roof, a sound that could quieten your mind. These are techniques that each individual is different, and that can quieten your mind, and you'll link with spirit in your own way. Lots of people might see, some people might hear, and some people just might feel. So it's clairsentience, clairaudience, clairvoyance, and some people have all three, but you don't know what you have until you tune in and connect with spirit. And if you create the right conditions, let me put it this way, James, you can see your breath on a cold day, can't you?
Yes, you can, yeah.
You can't see it today, but that doesn't mean it's not there. It just means it's not the right conditions for you to see it. But if you stuck your head in a freezer, you'd see it. So what we're aiming to do is create the right conditions to be aware of spirit. It's not that they're not there, they're always there. You just got to create the right conditions. Once you find your key, you're then able to switch on. Doesn't matter where you are, Piccadilly Circus or whatever, you can tune into that channel because you've learned where it is in your scope. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And the other thing I wanted to ask you, which was the last part of the question, is I wanted to ask, what are the dangers involved in contacting spirits? And I say this from things that we read in maybe fictional novels and things we see in terms of the horror genre and in cinema, that there could be dangers involved in, contacting the dead or trying to summon the devil in some sense. So I kind of wanted to ask you, are there dangers and precautions that should be sort of heeded before,
of course, because there's good and bad in this world as there is in the next. But you mentioned something there, you say contacting the devil, etc. The chances of me being stabbed in the street in the middle of the night, in the middle of downtown, are virtually none. Simply because you won't find me in the middle of the town and in an area like that at that time. So if you don't dabble in the wrong things, people that dabble with Ouija boards or go to places and try and evoke stuff for a laugh, what they're actually doing is they're opening a door that they don't know what's going to come in. And like attracts like. So therefore, it's like going to your bed and leaving your front door open. 9 times out of 10, somebody will knock on your door and go, do you know you've left your door open? But the 10th time somebody might come in. And once they're in, it's difficult to get them out. So it's the luck of the draw. If you're interacting or you're doing something wrong and you're trying to evoke the devil, like attracts like. That's like walking in the town in the middle of the night. If you don't do that and you link properly and those around you, for instance, you have people that are on spirit side. You will, even although you might not know them, they're connected with you. And those won't let something bad through your door to hurt you because they're like your doorkeepers. Those that love you on spirit side will look after you. Okay, but if you open the door and you evoke and provoke what's going on the darker side, then, that's very dangerous because you've let something in that will be very difficult to get out.
I wanted to pick up on this, the darker side and opening that wrong door. Have you ever been put in a position or yourself or by others where you've experienced danger that you've been scared of, apprehensive of, and just not wanted to go there? Has that ever happened?
Yes, it has. I taught at a place in Edinburgh, and a very prestigious place called the Arthur Conan Doyle Centre, and many well-known mediums teach there. And they have a medium's flat at the top of the building, and I never liked it going in there ever. It was just that, oh, the hairs on the back of your neck. And one time I was booked, I'm booked to go again, but I won't be staying there. And one time I was booked, and I went, and just a week before I was just organising things, and the receptionist said to me, well, we've had the Psychical Research Institute in this week doing some experiments. And I said, what? You mean there's people been in there, you've been stirring things up with a big stick, and I'm going to be staying in there at the weekend? Now, this is a big, huge listed building, and it's very active in Edinburgh. And the medium is left in that building by herself at the top of the 3 floors in the medium's flat. Okay, no one else is in that building, and that's where you sleep. All right. And I thought, oh my God, I'm not going to like this. So a student who always comes and follows me around on courses, etc. I said to her, have you booked accommodation if you're coming on my course? She said, no. I said, would you like to stay in the medium's flat with me? She said, oh, okay. I said, it's going to be active because they've been mucking around in there. And she says, that's fine. First night I did the demonstration, I didn't like it. She slept on the settee in the living room in a sleeping bag. The next night, the chairperson came in and we were just having a discussion. We'd been for a meal. I taught my workshops that day and I had another day to do. And I said to my friend Anne, stop, let's not talk about it anymore, because I was starting to see things form. Well, she went away and it was just Sam and I, my student. She slept, as I say, on the settee. We went to bed. The fire alarm went off at 2 in the morning and I knew there was no fire. And I went through and I said, the alarm's gone off, we need to leave the flat. And so we opened the door to leave the flat, and I just saw lots of people and we were like surrounded. She wanted to run down the stairs and I said, you will walk, and we switched all the lights on. And then we got to the panel where the alarm was and we phoned them up and said, you know, the alarm's going off. He said, well, which area is lit up? And I said, area 3. He says, that's the basement. Will you go down and check? And I went, there's no way in hell I'm going into the basement. If you could switch it off and reset it to come on if there is a fire, which there wasn't. So we went back upstairs, and then like someone was pushing on the door when we were in the flat. And I said to her, don't worry, we're safe in here. Then the bin lid started swinging backwards and forwards on its own. And it wasn't a great experience. And I just said, right, that's it, that's enough, you need to leave. And so apparently the Psychical Research Institute had been working in the basement. I didn't know that, I just knew they were working in there. So when I taught after that, I don't stay in the building because it was bigger than me.
We move from one chapter now to another, and I wanted to talk about a television experience in this case. And how were you approached by STB TV in Kiev to participate in the televised competition Battle of the Psychics? Can you sum up the experience and going on to win the competition? And lastly, can you also talk about the tragic events which led up to that competition when you tragically lost your mother and your husband?
Well, I was emailed from STB and I thought, okay, and I ignored it a few times. I thought, I don't know, I don't want to go to Kiev, Ukraine, no, thank you. And then one of the administrators did actually call me and said, look, it is real, this is real. And I thought, okay, I'll go out for the casting. I'd never been to Ukraine, and I'll do it. There were 70,000 worldwide that were all approaching in to take part in this competition. And during the casting, which was, we were there for a week, they were whittling it down, and we had to go into a room and look at a photograph and say who was alive and who was dead on the photograph. And kind of that's my thing. I can look at photographs and get quite a bit from them. I've always been able to do that. And I looked at this photograph and it had a few people on it. And I said, well, this person's alive, but they have an ulcer, they have a bad stomach. And this person is alive and they're left-handed. And this person, and I went along the line, and it happened to be the producer's family. And so they took me and they put me straight into the competition. They said no. And it was like an X Factor type competition. You would be voted best psychic or worst psychic, and then you'd be voted off. And I ended up being there for 7 months, and I won the competition. I took 54% of the votes and won it. But you just never know how long you're going to be there. And none of us knew how good anyone else was until the show started airing on the 12 weeks, and then you were able to see what your competition was. But the part where I was actually on camera, and you could look at this on my website, and they'd asked me to hold on to this chain which belonged to a woman who had died, and I described a murderer who was still out there. And again, think about it, the channel. I was tuned into the channel, transmitting, receiving, and I just happened to be right on the right network. And I saw a tattoo on his shoulder, a scar on his hand, the colour of his car, some of the numbers of his car. I described a murder scene because I saw the girl. I could still see her in my head, and where she was lying, where her bag was lying. And the clincher was, and I turned to the gentleman who was her father, and I said, but you're not her father through blood. And it happens that she was adopted at 6 months, and he hadn't been caught yet. And the police pulled me aside and said, you've described a murder scene that you couldn't possibly have known about. And hadn't won the competition then, but after that I went on to win it. And I was back in the UK, and it hit BBC News about 9 months later that the guy had been caught, and he had the tattoo on his shoulder, the scar on his hand. He'd sold the car, it had the number plate, and he said that I was 99.9% accurate with his description. He killed himself in prison, but he was caught. And again, that is what could happen when you're actually on the right network with the right channel and tuned in.
I can imagine it must have been a great feeling to have won that competition, particularly when so many people were involved and you were up against them in competition, and you received all this exposure and many opportunities from it. But I wanted to also ask you, there must have been sadness as well, because leading up to that, you'd lost your husband and you'd lost your mother as well. Can you just briefly just talk about those kind of, a sense of positivity and success through winning that competition, but also having to deal with that loss as well? That must have been psychologically very difficult to deal with as well.
Yeah, it was difficult. My husband wasn't ill. He just went out one day and collapsed and died in the street. And that was very difficult because we had a 17-year-old son. And to tell him that broke my heart. And also because when someone's not ill and they're all right one moment and they die the next, that was quite a trauma for us.
And a huge shock as well, because it's unexpected. Yeah.
Major shock. And then my mum took ill, and she passed away in the January before the competition, and that was a major shock as well. My father had passed away 20 or 30 years previous to that, but I had my mum, and we were all very close. My son, my mum and I, that was our unit. And so I was asked in the March if I would take part in this competition. I ended up going in the May to the competition, and I spoke to my son, who was then 18 by then, and I said to him, look, I've been asked to go out there, are you going to be okay? And I organised a clean lady, and I have good friends, but no family. And so I did go out there. I was still grieving for my mum. I didn't speak the language. I was in an apartment by myself. I didn't want to be in a hotel. I wanted to be self-sufficient. And I was in an apartment, and I would get myself to the filming on the metro and things every day myself, and I would get home at night. Now it's a very different culture of a country than ours, you know, very, very different. And it was hard, it was very hard, and I was quite upset. But it shows you that although I was at my lowest low with the loss, spirit, the people on spirit side didn't let me down, because when it came to actually doing the competition and doing the tasks, I was the only one that hadn't failed a task in the whole of the history of the show. And it just made me connect with them and have a stronger bond with them, because through all of that, when your mind's all over the place, for them to be able to connect and to get it right, that was a big thing for me.
They say in hardship, when you've experienced tragedy, loss, or difficulties in your life, sometimes they say it gives you that extra drive, that motivation, that burning ambition to achieve something. Did part of you, do you think it motivated you in a way, and you felt like, I need to do this for them as well, you know?
In a sense, but remember, my husband had passed, my mother had passed, the buck stopped with me. I needed to make things work, because I had a son to look after, a young guy. We had no family. It was me, and that was it. And so I needed to make this work for it to be good at it. And they didn't let me down. It was probably one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my life, was to stick out that competition, because it got to the stage sometimes it was just so hard, just being on your own and not speaking the language and not having a television that, you know, there was very few programs that were on that, you know, and I would be in my apartment and just wait for shooting to go on. And a lot of the people didn't speak languages, you know, I didn't interact with many folk. One young woman that I got to know, she was a law student, and she worked in the hotel that we all started off in, and we got together, and she would come and translate the show for me on a Sunday night, because it would go on after X Factor, and she would sit and translate, you know, what was going on, because it would be dubbed over in Ukrainian. And one of the times I wanted to just throw the towel in, because they wanted to have 3 people in the final, but there were 4, myself, Ukraine, Australia and USA. And they said, we're going to film you all being eliminated. And I said, you're not filming me being eliminated, because I've never lost a task. And he said, but we only have this space for a while. And I said, well, you want 3? Okay, you have 3. So I took my earpiece out, my microphone off, I rolled it up, put it down, I went, now you have 3. And I shot out, and they said, where are you going? I goes, I'm going on the metro to get myself back to my apartment, and I'm going to book a flight, and I'm going to go home. And of course, then the producer and the director and the interpreter turned up at my door. No, because they would want to know where I had gone, you know, where the Scottish psychic had gone. And I said, no, you're playing with people's emotions, all for the sake of £20,000 or 250,000 grivna. And I thought, nah. And I did turn around and say to the other contestants that were left, I went, you're allowing these to play with your emotions, and it's not right. But nobody had the guts to say anything. So I just thought, okay, totally shitting my nest here now. You know, no way on this earth am I going to win this now. But I did.
You did. I'd imagine your son must be very proud of you, you know, against all the adversity, the loss, being in a foreign country, alien to you in many ways. To achieve that, I bet there was such a great sense of pride.
Yeah, he's very much like his dad, which is very laid back. You know, I'm sure if I set my husband on fire, he walks on water. You know, that sort of person, just very quiet inside. But he was very proud of me. Yes, people would ask, you know, what's it like, your mum? And he'd say, she's just my mum. She's just my mum. And that he is proud. There's been many people of all different walks of life been in the house. He's been fighting past Toya to get to the dishwasher, and Jane McDonald and all the people, and he doesn't know who anybody is. He takes it totally in his stride, and Gary Newman, you know, he just has a chat with them. So he's not starstruck in any way.
Probably the best way to be. I wanted to move on from that experience of winning the competition and the doors it opened and the opportunities it led to, because you've traveled extensively in your career and you've worked with well-known actors, musicians, politicians. How would these opportunities come about? And can you share with us some of the people you've helped, and if you've managed to build a rapport or relationship with them outside of your domain of your work?
Yeah, it's like sometimes any people are just people. Everyone's just a person. They're normal. And of course, because they're in the public eye, people have their own persona of what they're like. But people are just people. And sometimes you click with someone and sometimes you don't, because they're just people. I'm always just the same with everyone. But you know, it's been through word of mouth that someone's contacted me, or someone's contacted me somewhere else, and then it's going, oh, you need to see this person, you need to see her, and whatnot. And I've kept in touch with a lot of people. Diane Ladd from Hollywood's a good friend, Lainey Kazan, Connie Stevens, they're all very good friends. I speak to Diane most nights. She'll call me up and say, sweet June, Laura Dern, you know,
Wow.
all of these people, but they're just people. And it's a privilege to be able to help people. I also do healing for many people that is not on my site, because I don't put it on my website, because I do it as my way of giving back. I've worked with Kate Garraway's husband. I've helped many people and touched them. And it just goes through wildfire. If you're good at something, or you achieve something, or you help someone, they'll say to someone, oh, you need to speak to her. And that's the way that it's just gone on.
I wanted to raise this point and hear your perspective. There's probably people you've come across, and maybe people that would listen back to this interview or seen any of your television exposure with the competition or any of the news interviews you've done in the past, that might be skeptical about the work of a psychic medium. If so, what would you say to them? Maybe to raise their awareness, maybe to raise their education in terms of the subject, the area. What would you say to them? What would be your comment?
Do you know, it's not everyone's cup of tea, this, you know, and I never force it on anyone. And unfortunately, James, people always send me the skeptics. They'll go and see her, and I'm like, why the hell are you coming to me? But when you lose someone that you love, that's when you start looking, because you think to yourself, surely that person just can't be gone. And that's when people start looking for people like me. When I do any shows or I do events, etc., I don't generalize. I try to make it specific. It's just the way that they work with me. So it could only apply to one person. You know, I'll give someone, for instance, somebody from Spirit had a glass eye and a metal plate in their head with one leg. You know, I mean, that's not generalization. And I think that it's, as I say, it's not everyone's cup of tea. But if you were in the right place at the right time to receive something just for you, then it could change your mind. But until you've had a loss and you go looking, then you're not going to know what it's like to never judge me unless you've seen me work, or you've encountered me, or you've had an experience with me. Don't judge me on just because you don't like psychics.
I think you raise an interesting point there. And I really like what you've just said, because I think you're right. As people, we change throughout our lives. We're never the same person. That's part of life. It's a journey, you know, and we go through this journey, and we may get married, we may have a family. That changes our perspective. Our perspective may change in regard to our beliefs on religion. We could start maybe out as agnostic, and then towards later life discover, we think that there's a God, and our political beliefs sometimes may change. So you raise a really interesting point. And I think sometimes people who come to the table with a sense of negativity or cynicism often do it without the education or actually looking into the subject, and it's based on a very naive and biased opinion, and I guess we can all be guilty of that to some degree.
The only sure thing in life, James, is change. Everything changes. Nothing stays the same. Nothing good, nothing bad. I notice that every day when I look in the mirror. I think, holy shit, what's happening? Everything changes. Everything.
Wise words. I want to move on to a completely different question now. I wanted to steer away from your work as a psychic and ask you, when you are able to relax and escape your day-to-day work, what are your other interests and hobbies?
My main interest is to relax. I like to play the piano, and I also used to have a horse, like to go horse riding, did karate for many years, and I like the garden. I'm one of these rescuers that I remember someone gave me a Christmas tree in a little pot like that, and it was sprayed white, and I was horrified, and I thought, oh my God, I have to save this. And now it's huge and it's in my garden, and anything that I get in little hanging baskets, these conifers, they're now huge and have to be cut back. I like to save things and grow things in the garden and just work away myself. And although I'm quite a sociable person and I chat away to folk, I quite like my own space. So I'm quite happy. When it was locked down, I was happy just being at home. I could have been at home forever. So that's my past. That's what I like to do.
During the last 60 minutes, we've discovered so much about you and how you've managed to build this reputation on an international level as a psychic. And we've also spoken about your early experiences of being able to see spirits and your work with the church and so many other areas as part of your life journey. But I wanted to ask you, how do you kind of look back at it all? And well, you're still working in this capacity now, but how would you sum it all up? And also ask how you've managed to turn tragedy in your life into a positive thing in helping others. Well, how do you kind of look back at what you've done, what you've achieved? And
you don't tend to look about what you've achieved. You just keep going and keep going and keep going, and something else happens, something else happens. You don't aim to head for a goal and think, this is what I want to achieve. Life's an experience that as you grow, your experience builds, your experience. It's been one heck of a journey. And I'm a great believer that unless you've actually walked in someone's shoes, you don't really understand how they feel. And so when you gain experiences of tragedy in your life and you're interacting with someone that's had a tragedy, you totally understand, you totally get it. And a young person couldn't have these experiences, no matter how many letters are after their name. If, for instance, they're a counsellor for someone that's lost a child, unless they've had a child and unless they've lost one and experienced that, they wouldn't have the same understanding. And so the more you'll find that mediums that are in this world, they've probably gone through a lot of tragedy to be able to help others, because you understand, you've walked in their shoes.
And lastly, June, is there an end point for you when you decide to give it all up and retire, or do you just want to keep going and keep pursuing and helping others and do what you do because you enjoy it and you obviously get a lot of fulfillment from it?
Yeah, I would like to continue because I feel that my job in life and what I'm here for is to touch as many people as I can in life to make a difference. And that's what it's about, not gathering all your trinkets and baubles and bits and pieces. You can't take that with you. You can only take back with you to spirit side of life what you've achieved or how you've helped people or what people think of you. And to make a difference and to touch people as many as you can, that's my aim and goal. I don't think I'm finished yet. I'm not finished yet, James. Got some life in me yet, you know.
June, we come to that part in the interview. This is the moment, as part of Your Take, we ask every single Your Take guest these same questions just to wrap up the interview. And we try and discover things that we may not know about them. But interestingly, we've done this to about 80 interviewees, asked them the same questions. And I'd imagine some of them you may know and have worked with, interestingly, who may be on the channel. I think Leo Sayer is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Here are the questions, though. Okay, June?
Okay.
Don't have to think about these in any great depth, just to find out things you like, maybe things you're not so keen on. Here we go. Number one, June, what would you say is your favourite pastime?
Piano and gardening and singing, music.
Music comes back, which has been a theme today. We move from music, gardening, to cinema. What would you say is your all-time favourite film and why?
You know, this is going to just blow your mind because my all-time favourite film is The Quiet Man with John Wayne. Yeah. And the reason I like that is because I have really happy memories sitting watching it with my dad. And it used to be one of these movies on every Christmas. And I used to always sit and watch it. And every time I see it on, I always watch it because it reminds me of my childhood with my parents, just that safe feeling.
Am I right? It's set in Ireland, isn't it?
It is.
And it's one of the all-time great Hollywood directors, John Ford, who was obviously known for working with John Wayne, mainly in the Western genre. And am I right? It was Maureen O'Hara?
That's right. Maureen O'Hara, Victor McLaglen, all these. And I was very lucky. My dad liked John Wayne. I was very lucky to get onto John Wayne's Minesweeper boat and lie on his bed.
Oh, wow. I must admit, I like John Wayne and I love John Ford films. So an interesting choice, and the first person to choose The Quiet Man. It's a great film.
Brilliant movie.
Cinema now to novels, but who would you cite as your favourite novelist?
Don't have one. Have one. No, I don't have a favourite. None at all really favourite. None.
Are you an avid reader, or do you not really find the time?
If I was to sit and have time, I would probably pick up a piece of music and read that rather than sit with a book. A piece of music.
Here's an interesting one, June. If you could have chosen a different profession, what would it have been?
Teaching music.
I knew teaching would come up, but obviously music comes up again. Your love of playing instruments.
Oh, yes.
We're talking about motivational people in your life, but the next question is, who would you say has been the greatest inspiration in yours?
I would have to say two people, and that's my parents, because they supported me when I was growing and I was different, I was sensitive, I had my ups and downs, I was trying to find my niche with this gift, if you would like to call it, and I was like hell on legs. And so I must have been an absolute nightmare to them. And they always supported me and had really good foundations, and I knew that they would always be there.
From inspirations to newspapers, and I'd imagine the newspapers are working very hard overtime at the moment with all that's going on. But that aside, do you read a newspaper? If so, which one would be your choice?
Nope, don't read newspapers. don't read them. If I want to listen to news, I'll pick up off the internet what's on the go, or I'll switch the telly on. No, there's too much bad news in them.
You're a wise, sensible lady, and I follow your lead on this one.
Oh.
I work in a shop, so I always see the headlines, but I'm not a newspaper reader or buyer. Not that that matters, but we move from newspapers, the press, to food. Do you like cuisine? And if so, what is your favorite food?
I like sushi and tuna. I just like all different types of sushi, but you know, especially the tuna ones.
Next, we ask our guests to choose a favorite cultural icon or inspirational figure. Could be someone from history, could be maybe a religious leader, a political figure, someone who maybe has changed our lives through an invention or a philosopher. Who would you cite as your favorite cultural icon?
Well, I actually probably it would be Vincent van Gogh for me, simply because people enjoy his art today. There is the darker side, there's the lighter side, there's such a contrast. He went through such a lot within his time. He never sold a painting really when he was alive, but like the Sunflowers is probably one of the most expensive, as you can say, of the art values. So I think he is a cultural icon to me.
That's an interesting choice. First person to choose Van Gogh. We move from Vincent van Gogh as your favorite cultural icon now to your favorite curse word. What would you choose and why?
My favorite curse word is shit. That's it. That's as bad as it gets. And, you know, I've even said that on stage and, oh shit, you must think that's a shit. But I don't think it's a particularly bad one, but it just comes out so easily.
Does indeed. We've established in our conversation this evening that you've traveled and worked in many places and seen the world. But when you get time to go away, relax, experience a different culture, what would you say is your favorite place or holiday destination?
My favorite place that I would have gone to twice a year is Palm Springs in California. And I've worked in California over the years. I haven't been there since 2019 because of COVID, etc. But I do intend to go back. I'm booking up for next year. But I just love Palm Springs. It's such a relaxed way of life. And when I travel there, you have to go through the mountains, and it's all the wind farms. And I just feel as if I'm going home.
Do you think you could live in America?
No.
If given the choice? No?
No. I like Scotland too much, but I could spend a lot of time in America, but I wouldn't live there. No, I wouldn't live anywhere other than my home in Scotland.
Back to music again, but who would you say is your favorite music artist? And do you have an all-time favorite album? And if so, what is it?
Now, see, you're giving me an age now, because when I give you this is just going to age me drastically. John Denver. Yeah. I really like John Denver. John Denver's greatest hits, and I even made my way to Monterey and took in where, you know, his plane went down. It went down, and it just evokes so many happy memories to me growing up. And I just think he was a phenomenal singer and a very talented artist.
Are you big into country music?
No, not really, but I like John Denver.
Last two questions, June. The first one, what would you say is your greatest achievement to date?
Okay. My greatest achievement to date, and I think it's still going on, is just being able to touch people, just being able to help people and touch people in life. I think that is a great achievement, to turn someone's grief into a sense of calm, to take their pain and despair and to give them comfort. That to me is a great achievement, and I hope I continue to do that for many years to come.
And then finally, June Field, the last question. how do you wish to be remembered?
Similar to just the last question, remembered as in being able to touch as many people as I can in life, somebody that cared, because whatever I do in life, wherever I am, I always raise money for charity, I always give. Doesn't matter what I'm doing, every venue, there's charity, money for charity raised, and touching people and helping people. That's how I'd like to be remembered.
Thank you, Ju. The final chapter this evening, but not the final chapter, obviously, in your life, and long may it continue all the good work you do. Firstly, I wanted to say a big thank you, because one thing we didn't mention in the course of our conversation is that you're actually on vacation. I'm correct, aren't I?
Yes.
So where are you at the moment?
I'm in Marbella, in Spain.
And when do you return home to Scotland?
26th of October.
So yeah, nine days. I wish you a lovely vacation, and thanks for giving up your time when you're on vacation to,
My pleasure.
To talk to me for an hour. I wanted to also finish up by saying that I've interviewed many different people from all aspects of life, and that's the whole point of your take. And many have gone into the interviews with, I would say, a sound knowledge of that area, particularly music, because like yourself, I'm a huge music admirer. I love music. It's part of my life. Cinema, the same. But I came into this subject this evening, as you could probably tell, quite alien to it, and doing the research, the prep for the interview, coming up with the questions, I found absolutely fascinating. And I was really interested to hear not just your story, but, what it involves being a psychic, and the tutorage, the experience, the knowledge that was gained, how you pass that on to others. So I found the last 60 minutes very interesting and very insightful. So thank you for kind of passing on your knowledge and making me more aware of a subject that until today I was not knowledgeable on at all.
My pleasure. Total pleasure. Lovely to speak to you, James.
Thank you. And finally, how do we find out more about the work you do, or if people may want to come to you to speak about loss or their emotions, or wanting to make contact with somebody, what would they need to do?
Just Google me. Just Google June Field or www.junefieldmedium.com.
Enjoy the rest of your holiday.
Thank you.
And thank you for being a guest on Your Take.
Thank you for asking me. Take care, James.